I'm Jenny Wiley, Operations Director here at 6 Seconds. Delighted to have you back as in our weekly panel as part of Growing You Online, which is our offering to support people to thrive in times of crisis. We know that in times like these, one of the most valuable things we can do is connect with our own emotions and one another in an emotionally intelligent way. Today's panel on innovation will start in just another minute or two. And in the meantime, would you please say hello in the chat and tell us where you're from? While we're waiting, let me tell you about a couple of the classes on next week's schedule. Please go to 6seconds.org/grow and welcome. Let's see, join us on YouTube and you can answer questions in the chat and ask us any questions that you may have. Just a quick message is it's a very hard time to be running a nonprofit. We're doing our best because we know how urgently the world needs more EQ, and because of your support, we're able to keep going. Please let me introduce you to Josh, our moderator, and we'll be posting some of the upcoming classes later at the end of the show. So welcome, Josh. Josh Freedman, CEO of 6 Seconds. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jenny, and it's great to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this. I think it's our 799th week of pandemic. It's kind of how it feels, but I guess maybe it's not quite that many. We have a really wonderful panel today. I'm very excited to bring this conversation to you. And we're going to go ahead and get started. And so panelists, if you would go ahead and put your cameras on, we'll say hi and we'll get going. And great. One more. All right. So today's panel topic is about innovation. And we're looking at the challenges of innovation and the opportunities of innovation and the emotions of innovation. And one of the things that we're trying to understand about is when things are difficult, how do we innovate? And it seems like this is the definition of such times where we have to innovate, we have to do things new, we have to figure out solutions. And yet we're in a place where many of us are struggling emotionally, where it's hard to find the energy that we need to move forward. And so there's this tension between the need to try something new and the need to figure out solutions, and perhaps the emotional reality that we're in. So I'm going to ask each panelist to introduce themselves just with a 30-second answer. One aspect of innovation that you're personally struggling with or finding challenging in these recent times. So if you just say who you are, where you are, one thing about you, and then your answer, what's one aspect of innovation that's challenging for you? And Solafa, could we start with you, please?
Yeah, so hello everyone, I'm Solafa Batterjee from Saudi Arabia. I'm an empathy catalyst, CEO of Doroob Endowment. My work is about empowering agents of positive change in their societies, so in Africa, in Asia and Asia. And we do that through investing in education and learning. And my challenge with innovation was in being so focused. So although this might seem a bit funny, it's good to be focused, but I think it's very normal that during adversity time, we just focus on what's important, and that could limit our options and opportunities.
Thanks, Solafa. Sarayu, how about you?
My name is Sarayu Srinivasan. I'm a venture capitalist and a longtime technology executive. I work for the federal government now, working on lab to market, better connecting federal innovation with our private sector. This isn't a recent thought about innovation, but I would say that we often think about innovation as these big things like SpaceX or Tesla. And actually, if you look, innovation happens all around us in many, many different ways. And so I would just encourage people to think about all of the sort of common ways that innovation happen. Doesn't have to be, $1 billion market and something you read about in the Wall Street Journal. It could be something happening, on your street corner.
Thank you. Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Lai. I'm from Toronto. I am the co-founder of a new agency. We're about 3 years old now. We're called No Fixed Address. And really our core focus is using the power of creativity and storytelling to change behavior and, to solve our clients' problems through that change in behavior. And I think what we've struggled the most with the last little while is really creating a sense of security for our people, because we know without security, we cannot be creative, we can't innovate, but these times are uncertain. So how do you create safety and the certainty necessary to get the best out of your people and put them in their places of excellence while managing the reality of, things are not certain and they are constantly changing, and how do we help people embrace that fluidity and that ambiguity without, kind of losing it while they're also trapped inside their homes.
Yeah, I was going to say No Fixed Address is just the right name for all of us at this moment, or maybe it's One Fixed Address.
Well, we've been exceptionally lucky in that, the way that we founded this company was around the philosophy of no fixed solutions, no fixed way of doing things. And so we've really been lucky in that we've hired people with a very, what we call a hybrid mindset, very entrepreneurial. We give them a lot of autonomy, high responsibility, but high autonomy. And so in some ways we were born for this moment, but it's still not to say it isn't a struggle. It is absolutely a struggle for everyone. We're just well-positioned, I would say, to manage it to the best of our ability.
Great. Sabrina, how about you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Sabrina Merlo. I'm currently with navigating this little light here. Open Source Medical Supplies. It's a brand new nonprofit that originated actually in direct response to the coronavirus situation and the breakdown in the medical supply chain for people in terms of professionals in civic service as well as in hospitals with personal protection, the lack of personal protection equipment that we're seeing across the country. So it's interesting. This was an innovation born in direct response to a stressful situation. And so it's fascinating to see a very productive and important and meaningful response to a stressful environment, that all of these people in a distributed way are doing local, small scale and medium scale manufacturing to provide in a local context, filling the gap in this breakdown. Masks, face shields, gowns, gloves, all of this stuff is being produced in local markets in the US and around the world to try to help professionals on the front lines dealing with COVID-19. I would say as an organizer and trying to build a state of, or a community of practice across these mostly volunteers who are popping up all over to organize themselves and be productive. There's an aspect of trying to promote collaboration across all of this generosity and all of this initiative. That is probably in some ways one of the challenges, is there's duplicity and to try to align people and coordinate folks and coordinate efforts when people are doing this in an emergency situation, as well as when they're doing it out of their own generosity and volunteer efforts. It's an interesting moment.
Yeah, let's come back to that in a minute, about this challenge of trying new things, but also being focused and the risk of too many new things. But Katja, could you please introduce yourself and tell us what's challenging?
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Josh. My name is Katja Peterson. I'm the co-founder and president of Peterson Argo Inc. And our work focuses on emotional wellness and transformation through the power of story. We love gathering people together to look at ways we can take challenges and turn them into opportunities. And what an incredible time in our lives to be dealing with exactly that skill set. And for me, I think the biggest challenge right now is holding that tension between, how do we deal with the fear and the uncertainty and this overwhelming amount of information that's coming our way on a daily basis throughout the day about the negative stuff. Take that, learn from it. How do we support people to turn things around and say, the time is now. We don't have time to wait. All hands on deck right now. Let's get together. Let's collaborate. Let's make a difference. Every moment that we are spending together right now is saving lives. So at the same time, part of that tension is for me to hold a space for those who are innovating and they're coming forth and they're in the forefront so that their emotional wellness is taken care of at the same time.
Great. I don't think that you maybe would have been able to see it on YouTube, but there have been a lot of heads nodding from the other panelists as each panelist was talking. And so I have a challenge for those of you who are watching and also for the panelists. What did you hear as a common theme? What was the storyline that you heard in these introductory answers? And I think I'll give you one that I heard, which is about there's kind of contrasting emotional experiences that might be challenging, but actually might be important. And that, perhaps I think sometimes we think about, like, if I'm in this one feeling state, that's a good feeling state, and this is a bad feeling state. But I wonder if actually there's a contrasting feeling states that actually part of what catalyze new ways of thinking. What else did one of you hear as a theme in this introduction so far?
Well, I can say I actually recently read a very interesting thing that said the Chinese word for crisis is actually made up of two characters, which are danger and opportunity. And so I was reminded of that as the other panelists were speaking, that, without danger, there is no opportunity. And so I guess, Josh, to what you were saying as well, it's that duality of walking that line where we can take advantage, embrace the danger to lean into opportunity. And I think that's probably what a lot of us are struggling with, trying to find the right ways to coach people or to help people find that place of embracing discomfort in positive ways.
Another thought?
Well, I will follow up with that. I think what I'm discovering is because we have this, what we're calling social isolation, and in a sense, it's really truly about physical isolation. And I think we're more connected than ever. It's unbelievable to see the creative ways that people are connecting. So what I'm encouraging people is, please don't hold on to these worries and all the unnerving things that are going on in your emotions. Share them with somebody, the people that you care about, who you trust, the colleagues, your peers. We're not in this alone, and that's not who we are as social beings. So when it comes to innovation, we need to keep the conversations going. We need to be able to be there for each other. So rather than feeling the despair, let's embrace it and let's voice it and say, this is what I'm thinking. This is what we need right now. What can we do together? And I think that's going to help us to balance a little bit more what needs to happen.
Solafa.
Yeah, I guess I'm hearing a lot of us rather than me, you, or they, them. People are using different wording and expression styles. It's as if we've really become one big community where we all speak the same language. We all have the same worries. It doesn't matter which part of the world you are in, or what nationality you are, or what religion, or what color. For the first time, I would say in decades, it's amazing how this challenge has united us. We it's so inspiring. It's amazing how inspiration comes and how it shows itself through difficult times. So using us.
It reminds me of the word awe. You know, we say, yeah, that's awesome, like fun. But awe also has an element, the meaning of the word awe, the feeling awe has an element of fear in it. There's like, it's something way bigger than us. Sarayu.
Yes, I just wanted to add something, which is I think that we place a huge premium on happiness in this society. And I love Rilke, who says, go through these feelings of depression, of suffering, of whatever it is, because there is something on the other side and we don't know what that work is that's happening. So I often think about sort of when I'm having a dark time or if I'm struggling through something, to actually go through it and not try to quell those feelings. Great art and great music and great innovation comes from that sort of going through it. It's substance. So I would maybe put forth a little bit of a unusual view in that I think that sometimes like having to figure out how we stay happy and up, I think sometimes going through this is good. And I think some of this isolation is good. And you even see outside, like now for the first time, the Himalayas are visible from places in India. The pollution has gone down. There's a lot of healing that's sort of happening. And I think sometimes through this reflection and turmoil inside, you come out stronger and better and maybe even more innovative on the other side.
I mean, certainly my own experience is that when I follow my old pattern, which is to push away feelings, they kind of, I mean, I think the word is actually re-feel. But when I let myself actually feel the pain and don't hide from it, it transforms, and it transforms my perspective. It reminds me of that gorgeous poem from Rumi, The Guest House, where he wrote, even if there are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. So what are we getting clear? What are we getting ready for in this time that really may be one of the most innovative times of our lives?
That's beautiful, Josh. I think what we're getting clear of is probably have we been paying attention? There's so many signs and so many events that happen in our lives in the last few years that it's almost like the universe is trying to shake us up and say, are you listening? Are you paying attention about what we need to be doing right this moment? And
I sure feel shaken up.
I'm sure. And it's like, it's time to open up our minds and our hearts and our bodies and say, okay, we need to clear this space so that by embracing, it was so well said a little bit ago, by embracing our feelings and going with the pain, going with the fear and whatever else we're experiencing, it gives us that openness that we need, that clearing, so that we can allow the new to come. And that way we can hopefully move forward in a good way because we were courageous enough to allow ourselves to feel.
Sabrina, how about you?
Yeah, I'm enjoying the conversation. I have, I think there's an element to not just experiencing the anxiety and going with the fear, but also recognizing it as a thing, like sort of saying, okay, there's that fear and there's that anxiety. That's real. I feel that. But trying to hold a little bit of meta view in your experience to say, okay, I can feel that, but there's also a reality where I need to actually, I need to get some stuff done. I need to work proactively to solve this problem. I cannot give in to this. I was laid off after 9.5 years with a role at an entity that I was deeply in love with in my work in last June. And I took some time because it was a long sprint to pay attention to my kids and my house and all of that. And then in the fall, I started to really look for work. and it was not easy. And in some ways, it's odd that the world has come to meet me in terms of this level of unemployment that's going on, and odd that I've also found employment at this moment because of
created employment.
But I mean, to the extent that I've been living in the reality that 30% of Americans are in terms of being unemployed, and really, yeah, okay, we have a few months. If you have a mortgage, you might have a little bit of a break here. But the reality is that the indicators are scary, and you know, learning how to manage the anxiety and to actually you know, honor it, but really, really push yourself to find a space where you need to act as well, like to try something. You may not have. It took me a long time to figure out how to plug back into a work environment. And you have to remain open. And if you're in a fear state, you can't be in an open state.
Solafa, I want to go to you on this. I know that at times you've also struggled with some self-doubt about, can I do this? Can I do this in my culture? And in, you know, can I step up as a CEO? Am I ready? What do you do with these feelings?
I want to reflect on 2 points, Josh, if I'm allowed.
Please.
So the first thing is patterns. You spoke about patterns, you know, and how they, I would say, control us during stressful times, because this is how we've been created. And a very interesting experiment that I have tried with myself, when all of this started, I actually had a one-to-one talk with myself. And I think during isolation time or alone time, this is a good time to get reintroduced to ourselves and, you know, renew the self-contract and a relationship. So I went back to my patterns where I know, you know, I have strong patterns, but I also know that I have patterns that pull me down during the difficult time. And for me, my physical well-being was one of those patterns. And I know that when I am physically not well, or when I'm going through difficult times, my physical part gets affected, and that affects everything else. So I actually developed or created a pattern that I want to live by. Was it easy? No, but it was a very interesting challenge, you know. Failing to plan is planning to fail. So I said, you know what, Solafa, you just need to plan for this just like any other project. And I took the challenge. And some days the plan just goes, you know, perfectly, moves as I wish. And other days they're just challenging times. And this takes me to dealing with the emotions that create that sense of draining. I just have to say, you know, emotions are the panelists. You just need to get them together in one room, have that open discussion, and allow every feeling and every emotion to speak out and express their point of view of what we're going through, and respect their differences and respect what they're telling you. Emotions are data, you know. They are there to tell us something very valuable, something that can guide us toward where we need to head, how are we going to do this, and why. Why are we feeling this, and how can we take this why to move us to a better place?
Rachel, I want to come back to you. There's a question or comment from, I'm sorry if I pronounced this wrong, Arusa Kazmi in the chat, which is the idea of and instead of but.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that affect our emotions and our creativity and our problem solving?
Yeah, and I think that's a great, we talk about that a lot in terms of the creative process, that it's yes anding, not yes butting, which is allowing other perspectives to come and to build on things. But I want to go back for a second, if I'm allowed to, because I wanted to pick up on how important the idea of honesty is, and how that's been a really powerful tool for us working with our people in terms of transparency. You know, from the very beginning, we admitted that we were scared. And in fact, you know, if you're not scared, there's something wrong with you. because it means you've numbed everything out and you're not letting yourself feel it. That's okay. It's okay to be scared. And that fear is the first step to change. You know, there's a great quote, which is everybody wants change until they have to give up a crutch. And so this is a good time to kind of examine what are the crutches that I'm holding on to and how are they stopping me from manifesting my greatness in this world? And yes, anding is part of that, which is to say, you're not one thing or another, you can be both. And actually in that duality of fear but excitement, because we talked a lot about that too, we're saying, you know, we're all scared, that's normal, it's okay to be scared, but in that fear is an opportunity to explore what matters to us and how do we want to connect with one another and how can we be kinder to ourselves. And we talk a lot about, because one of the first things we saw is we started working through Zoom, as everyone is, and people were working crazy hours. They were working 24/7. They were not stopping because they didn't know how to turn off, frankly. I think we live so distracted all the time, they didn't know how to find that space. And so one of the first things we talked to them about was you can be productive and just be. It's not one or the other. You can be valuable and you can also be still. And finding that place of being okay with yes anding. It's not I'm this and I'm not allowed to be that. You're allowed to be both. You can be scared and you can be courageous.
And maybe, in fact, we can't actually be courageous unless we are scared.
100%. Without fear, there is no courage, right?
Yeah, I want to come back to this point about like complexity, and we're trying new things and we're experimenting and we're in kind of startup mode with a lot of stuff. And I think it's easy to lose focus. And maybe, Sarayu, you could talk a little bit about that. You're in an environment where there's a lot of things happening. How do you decide where to put your energy and attention?
So I'll talk about it from two different perspectives. I'm at the federal government right now, and the first answer to that is like it's all over the place. And the government, it necessarily needs to be that way. So every agency is doing a billion different things. There's so many different things happening, and that's very good. It's not very centralized. But that's the way the government should work, right? The government can't pick winners. It's got to sort of move to help everybody. So that's sort of happening. So plugging in various places, it's both an opportunity and it can also be a little confusing. I've had many people from the outside reach out to me wanting to help with the crisis, with PPE and all sorts of things. And trying to find where they can go can be sometimes a bit challenging. So there's that piece. In the business world, I think it's a little bit different. And I might apply this also to life in that, in my experience as a venture capitalist, the companies that end up doing the best are the ones that continue to invest in sort of basic research and R&D, and they come out, and it seems very counterintuitive because the first thing you want to do is pull back. The stock market is going down and people are, you know, unemployment is going up. And the thing you want to do is, you know, sort of hide your resources or make
shelter in place.
You want to make sure you have dry gunpowder, but the companies that do the best actually keep that steady sort of investment into R&D, and they come out great on the other side. And I think that's also a nice analogy for life, that we don't sort of stop living. And sometimes it can be hard because your routine has gone out the door and you're kind of like, you know, you're either, it's feast or famine, you're either really busy or there's not anything to do or you feel powerless. But kind of sometimes keeping that routine, self-care, things that we have the luxury of doing, many of us that have jobs and are working from home, I think it's a good analogy to sort of apply to your life, to continue with those things so that you can come back out stronger on the other side, whether it's educating yourself, taking an online class, plugging in, you know, in the government, again, everybody working I'm in a fellowship program and everybody has reoriented to work on COVID. You know, whether you're at NASA or the USDA, I mean, the entire team, it's just really inspirational. So yeah, two different ways of looking at that.
Thank you. I want to come back to another comment from the chat. Makita brought up a challenging and important point, which is that this does hit us all, and this is a unifying experience. And at the same time, cultural differences, wealth differences make this experience profoundly different. And there are people who are in a place where they're not worried about their rent, but there are a lot of people in the world who couldn't pay rent to begin with. So as we think about this challenge and the urgency of safety, and getting kind of into Maslow's hierarchy of needs and like going right back down to the bottom, how do we maintain a focus on actually this being a unified and unifying moment? How do we maintain a focus that we're going to find solutions for everyone? And Solafa, let's start with you.
I guess one thing pops into my head: compassionate empathy. So, which is, again, it's not easy during this time, but actually choosing to empathize and trying to understand what others are going through, learning the language of others. Again, it's about us. It's not about me. It's not about we. So it's not about my family. It's not about Doroob. It's not about our employees. It's about the whole world. Being curious, doing that empathy, trying to understand what others are saying, what insights are there behind the words that they're expressing. So compassionate empathy, empathy puts people together in one place. Allows people to try on different people's shoes and sizes and colors, which is uncomfortable sometimes, but it gives that opportunity. If I'm not a person who is worried about my rent at the end of the day, I have other worries. Yeah. So even for those who have bigger financial worries, I'm sure that there are other individuals who have well-being worries, or family members, they have older family members and they're worried about them, or children who live in other areas of the world where there's this physical distance. So this is a time where empathy is being challenged. Science have proved and research has proved that empathy is decreasing. This is the time where we need to choose empathy, practice it, learn more about it, and learn how to apply it in our lives, learn other languages.
Katya, what do you think about that?
Oh, that was so beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. I think empathy, in my opinion, is at the heart of creativity and innovation. It's about our organizations and our community learning how to prioritize, how to move forward, how to put one foot in front of the other, how to follow our North Star of what matters right now. And in order to do that, we need to really be solid, finding within ourselves that sense of empathy, that gut feeling that it's not about waiting for someone else to say to us, this is what you should be doing. It's about us having the capacity to understand, to be compassionate, to look at the point of view where everybody else is coming from, and how can we, in our small way or a big way, contribute to the bigger whole. And I'm encouraged to see our community, where I am here in Sonoma, California, people are jumping in, paying attention to who needs safety, shelter, food, who normally would not be taken care of. How can we all step up and make it happen? And we also need to realize that there is inequality, and how quickly some people are getting the support they need versus others. So I guess it's still, for me, it is about a sense of urgency through empathy that allows us to see their urgency even more, but not to hold us back, rather to help us become more creative in how we support each other.
So I think if I'm really honest about my own feelings, it's actually scary to me to open my heart that big. I know Solafa's doing a lot of work with kids and families in Sudan and Kenya. Yesterday I was on Zoom with a close colleague of Solafa's and mine, Jane Morrison in Dubai, who's working all over Africa and India. And there's one of our colleagues yesterday was telling me what's happening in the Bahamas and in Panama and the level of suffering in the world right now is just so big. I feel like if I actually open myself to that, I don't know if my heart's that big. Being able to move forward in that. Does anybody have a thought about that?
One of the reflections I had after one of the U-Connection sessions that we have every week with Jane, who is 6 Seconds Regional Director for Middle East, Africa, and India, is vulnerable empathy. The connection between vulnerability and empathy. True empathy leads to vulnerability. Allowing yourself to be open and excuse me in using this word, but being naked. Vulnerability is about being naked, allowing yourself to be naked and seeing others naked in their most weakest times. That in itself does not happen until there's trust. So going back to empathy, so choosing empathy is it's a window to building that trust during difficult time. This is what we need. We need to trust that each one of us is not thinking about his own well-being and safety. We're thinking of communities and nations. We're thinking of the world. And going with this flow of ideas, so empathy, vulnerability, collecting those insights from people's feelings and needs, this is where innovation sparks. Innovation is about addressing people's needs, finding solutions in a way that no one has thought of that before, So it's a path. It's a path that needs a lot of courage, commitment, trust, but it will not come easy. We really need to be vulnerable to actually be able to read the script of that path.
That's beautifully said. Rachel?
Josh, if I can respond a little bit more about what you said. I think when we feel that vulnerable and we have that sense of pain, and I have to be honest, for me, my tears have come over and over again when I hear the stories of people dying alone and not having a loved one with them, not being able to say goodbye. It has broken my heart many, many times. And because I also work with children and trying to explain to children what is going on in our world and what's happening and why is challenging. So one of the things that I try to do is to build at least a support system so that I can be gentle with my heart and I can be compassionate with my heart. So I have people to share while I'm holding the heart of many. I hope that somebody's also holding mine, because we need that right now. And it is a tender moment that I think we're going to continue to find ourselves in. And sometimes the tears come and I just let them flow for a long time. And even when I'm in the presence of the children, they need to know that it's okay for us to experience that, but that we also have the capacity and the courage, because we're holding each other up, to do the right thing and to move forward.
Thank you. I want to go back to Rachel for a second on this question of the path that Solafa is talking about, and like reading the signals and these emotional signals and others on the path to something new. So tell us more about how do we follow that path?
Sure, I'll do my best. But first I want to thank you for your honesty, because I think that's a really tough thing to admit, that it is frightening to open ourselves up to other people's suffering. And I think it's so important that we talk about those things. And I can both identify and empathize with that feeling, because I think we are afraid that we're going to lose ourselves in someone else. And we're so attached to ego. And when we talk about the path, I often try and remind myself, and I'm very far from perfect, that it's not about me at the end of the day. And that true joy, happens when I put myself in service of other people. And we can only do that if we open up our hearts, and we can only do that if we're willing to empathize with them. And it doesn't mean that I have to feel their feelings. In fact, I feel like that's selfish. My job isn't to feel their feelings. My job is to hold their feelings for them and to reflect them back to them so they can process them. And that's really integrating, right? The parts of our mind to be able to work our way through those feelings so that they can find the strength or find the courage or find the vision or the purpose or the values that are going to help support them through their journey. So when I take myself out of the equation and I say, you know, this isn't about me having to feel things for them or solve their problems because I can't. And I think moments like this, I won't tell you the big long story, but we started our agency because my husband lost his job. And that was a very difficult time for us because he was very attached to his ego and, you know, had a big job. And what we discovered through that process was that these are the calls to become the heroes of our own lives. Because we all have to follow our own path. We all have to find the strength within us. So my job is to support people. Now that we've learned that or been through that experience, that's really what we try and replicate with all the people that we engage with, which is to say, how do I hold your feelings for you in this moment so that you can feel them and I can support you through that feeling and find the courage to discover what you were actually meant to do or what you're capable of doing. So that's kind of personally how I would interpret the path that Solafa was talking about.
Thank you. Sabrina, let's come back to you for a minute and talk about this question of kind of managing complexity, complex feelings, complex projects. How do we kind of keep our focus forward, but also open?
I think sometimes it comes down to some very basic practices. Like for me, taking a breath, going on a walk, getting maybe into the physical for a moment and stepping out of go, and taking a moment to take inventory and to find a place of calm. So however that does, for me, it's exercise. For other people, it might be a glass of wine. But that's a very like basic personal practice that I think, especially when now we have this new pattern of staying at home all the time, that issue of exerting a little bit of energy and discipline around finding, like another panelist was talking about, the rituals of trying to practice, self-care. I think that's really important.
Yeah, Nir Ayal on one of our recent online conferences talked about time boxing and like really just planning some time for the different things we need to do. And I suspect many of us are now surprised to find how full our calendars are. And I have just been on Zoom, like so many meetings every day. And I've let externalities drive my schedule. And I think probably it's time to take back my schedule a little bit. Well, I want to turn to the future. Sarayu, let's go to you for this. We have in this moment, like I'm driven by these externalities and in some way reacting, but we have this opportunity right now to think about building capacity. And I know this is not your role in the government right now, but if it were your role, if you were, and you could just say, hey, here's what I'm going to do in this country, in this world, in organizations I work with, to build capacity for the future innovations that we need. Because unfortunately, this is not going to be the only crisis. What would you focus on?
Yeah, that's a tough question, right? Because I think if you look at society now, everyone is so upset that we weren't prepared. And I mean, my question is, how do you prepare for something like this? this is one of the more prepared countries in the world. I've lived all over the world, and we're incredibly prepared for things. And you know, you just don't know what you can't know. And so I think that's a very tough question. In relating it to my work specifically about engaging federally funded innovation with the private sector, the reason that's so important is because our federal innovation underlies everything, from drinking water came from federally funded innovation to, you know, the internet, to blueberries, cranberries, permapressed cotton, canned food, you know, cans, the things that we have food in. So unfortunately, we don't have the days where corporates worked closely with the government to bring that to market. And so now the capacity building is really about trying to get sort of the private sector to wake up and say, hey, I know you don't want to work with the government and you don't want to come back earlier and help fund these things because that's not your job. You wait till it's actually de-risked and then you fund it, which is a weird thing to say as a VC. But, you know, it's time now to kind of, you know, I don't want to say it's charity, but giving back, but it's also for your, you know, making sure that your own future is okay, so that you have the markets to invest in, so that we have national security, so that we have a strong economy. So building that capacity for me very specifically and personally in my role is getting that engagement, and getting them to, you know, invest in this stuff, help mature it and bring it to market. And I kind of think of that again as an analogy for all the federal government. I mean, are people, you know, we can go around now stockpiling masks and serums and all the stuff that we need to fight COVID. The next thing's not going to be COVID. You know, it's going to be something else. And then we'll say, well, why didn't we fireproof everything? Or why didn't we, we knew there was an asteroid coming. Why didn't we build out, you know, I think it's easy to point the finger. And I think how you do that is kind of more in a broad sort of way. And so I feel that what we're doing to build out capacity in this very specific case is the right thing to do. But I think it's a very tough question that you ask.
Solafa, let's go to you since it's a tough question. And in some way, your work is this. Like, your work is about building capacity for the future. So if you were going to start an organization that was going to build capacity for future innovation and help prepare societies and communities and the world for a better future, what is it that you would make sure you were building?
So there's this management tool, that's called a management tool called business continuity management, where organizations actually create a system for crisis, you know, to deal with difficult times. And as we are going, you know, the whole world is going through that. I was thinking, as humans, we keep on focusing on systems, not realizing that we are the systems, you know? So why don't we create a human community management where we create human systems or empower humans to create their own systems to face crisis? So whether it was Corona or it was, you know, floods, you know, TV channels keep casting these movies from 20 years ago about everything that could happen to the world. We need to create human systems, empower people to create their own system to face whatever crisis we're gonna come through. So a system that focuses on the what. So what are our feelings and what feelings do we want to choose during difficult times? And you know, the how can I use my optimism? How can I balance between this optimism and the consequences of my decision? From where do we find our intrinsic motivation during difficult times? It's one of the most difficult things to do, to actually drive yourself and push it to leave bed in the morning and to put focused time. We are working 24 hours a day, but is it constructive work? Is it focused work? And then wrap all of this with the why. You know, how am I doing this for myself, for others, for the world? How writing the history during that, writing the history that after 100 years, people will they will read this history. Now we have the freedom to write that history. Now, are we using that freedom to document something that we will be proud of? So, I would go back and say it's creating that system, that human continuity management system that strengthen us as humans to face whatever comes in our face. And this is capacity. Human capacity is the capacity.
Yeah, I'd like to actually I think generosity is a great way to move, to find some momentum out of this place. These things about curiosity and empathy and generosity, like maybe it's a time to actually volunteer. If you don't have work or a particular focus, find a way to plug in and give, and that actually has its own energy and its direction.
So I want to actually just reiterate that a lot of people have been asking me, how can I help 6 seconds? What can I do? And it's actually really challenging to answer that question because, we're like just been running fast trying to solve some urgent things. But what I've found is actually the most powerful is the little acts of generosity. Somebody shared on Twitter yesterday that they liked the class that they were in and something they appreciated. And it gave me so much energy. And, I feel like these little acts of generosity, noticing somebody, thanking somebody, I mean, for me, has just been really fantastic. And so I'd want to say to everybody watching, if you're wondering how you can help us, engaging and sharing and communicating and telling us, leaving a comment about something you liked, and that's just hugely motivating to the 6 Seconds team. And so I wanted to say thank you for those who are doing that and encourage that. And unfortunately, we're almost out of time. And so for those of you who are on YouTube, I would really appreciate it if you could share in the chat, what are you taking away from this conversation? What's the what's the message for you? And how is that message going to help you? What are you going to do with that? And for panelists, I'd like to ask you the same thing. What are you taking away from our conversation today? And what did you hear? What did you learn? What inspired you? What's going to help you in your work as innovators and leaders? So maybe, Kadia, we could start with you. What are you going to take away from today? And I'd just like to ask everybody to keep these short because we are getting close to our time.
Well, what I'm taking away from today is that incredible sense of tenacity and willingness to really face what it is that we're going through right now. And I want to thank everybody on this panel for that, and allowing ourselves to be creative. And one of the things that I would like to share as a takeaway for all of us, I hope, is how do we now take the next step and ask ourselves, what is our new normal? And let's face it, that when we get to the other side of this crisis, our world will never be the same. But rather than living in despair, to ask the question, now what have we learned from all this? And what are we going to choose to prioritize in order for us to continue to grow and thrive as a community, as the world? And we can do it. We have that capacity as humanity. And together we can be unstoppable as long as we hold that dear to our hearts.
Thank you. Sarayu, how about you? One takeaway from today?
I really loved what Solafa said. I think it really captured where she said human capacity is the capacity. I think that captures everything. So thank you for that.
Rachel.
Sorry, I was on mute. I just going back to what you're saying, Josh, earlier, just now, about the power of seeing other people and seeing their work and acknowledging it. I think one of the most beautiful things that's happened as part of this is that all those people that were invisible to us, the people who clean for us, the people who take care of people in hospitals, all those people that we don't see and that we haven't valued to date, that value of caring, I think we see them in a way that we haven't seen them before. And I just fundamentally believe in the power of seeing and being seen. And I think part of when you talked about that comment, the energy we get from it, or the generosity that Sabrina was talking about, that's part of it, I think, acknowledging and seeing each other and continuing to do that. So thank everyone for the conversation. It was really inspirational.
Sabrina.
I appreciate this moment of just being able to be in an environment where there's a lot of words for these. I don't live in this world normally where there's actually descriptors and descriptions around these experiences. So it gave me some inspiration to dig a little deeper into that.
And Solafa.
I would say honesty. Rachel spoke about honesty. So let's not simplify what we're going through, okay? It's huge. And the more we're honest to ourselves, the more we are well prepared for it. And I guess maybe a silence of 15 seconds just to feel how big what we're going through is, and just realizing that we cannot face it unless we're unified, you know, unless there's empathy and there's trust.
Thank you, Solafa. Thank you all. I also wanted to acknowledge what a delight it is to be on a panel with these amazing women. And it wasn't something intentional that we're like, oh, we're doing a panel on innovation. Let's get all women as the panelists. But it's how it worked out. And I think there's a lesson there, which could be its own panel. So I won't go into it, but just to say thank you, and thank you for your leadership, and thank you for being here. And I'm grateful. And I'm grateful to all of you who are watching and joining us. And we will be having another panel next week. And then the Earth Day Eve, we have a huge treat that's spontaneously happening. And I can't wait to tell you about it. We'll be sharing that next week, what's happening, but it's going to be fabulous on the 21st. So I want to turn it back to Jenny. Thank you, panelists, again. Thank you, all of you who are watching. And we'll look forward to connecting online and soon in person. And I just wanted to say one more thing, which is, I know for many of you, you're about to celebrate Easter. Some of you are celebrating the Jewish high holidays. And I don't know what other holidays there are happening right now, but it's this time of spring and this time of transformation. And you know, I think deep in our roots as humans, we have this idea of springtime as a moment of innovation. So, thank you, everyone, and Jenny, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you for this inspiring conversation, and thank you to all of you who joined live and to those watching. If you like this, please share. We would love to see everyone watching and share this video and tell the world why this conversation matters to you. I also want to remind you that we have powerfully supportive classes every weekday at Growing You Online. More are coming soon, and they are free or very low cost. These are authentic, caring conversations where you work live online with a skilled facilitator to grow your EQ skills. And I also want to remind you that in this challenging time as a nonprofit, we need your support financially if you can donate, but equally important is your involvement. Joining, sharing, communicating in the world right now. EQ is becoming precious. Let's make sure we keep practicing and sharing. And in case you've not seen next week's schedule, our next panel will be on people at the center of leadership, about how crisis teaches us about the essence of leadership and the guiding principles for more effectively leading people through the pandemic. So thank you for joining us, and all of you watching, thank you for doing what you're doing to share and grow emotional intelligence. And we hope to see you all online soon.